And something that I think a lot of people are going to be very, very happy to see is going back into their local high schools football stadiums and enjoying some games this fall, as they'll be back in person. Crowds will be back. The players will be back without wearing masks, and they're going to be having a really exciting football season after what was an exciting, although unique football season in 2020. And we're pleased to be joined by Mick Mccabe, high school sports writer and contributor to the Detroit Free Press, with us now on the Megacast. Mick, thanks for being with us today.
Great to be here.
Appreciate having you on. So as we head into this high school football season, different from last year, what are some of those differences as we kind of return back to a more normal paradigm on the gridiron for these teams? What sort of is the vibe at most of these training camps that these schools are going through, and as they're practicing and preparing for that first game that's different from the situation a year ago?
Well, we're playing on opening night.
Yeah.
Opening night last year was postponed. We had the first 3 games of the regular season wiped out, and then they started the schedule like with game 4, and to make up for that, the MHSA said, okay, everybody's going to make the state playoffs this year, which, in the last 19 years or whatever, only 256 teams made the state playoffs. So basically they doubled the size of the state playoffs last year. And then, during the playoffs, we had the interruption, and who knew? I mean, we didn't really know if we were going to get to finish the season last year. So now, we're getting ready to go, and everybody's very optimistic. They're glad fans can be back and all that. Not me. I'm thrilled that Oakland County has a mask update mandate now, because I think it's really important in schools, especially elementary schools, and some high schools too, because not everybody has been vaccinated, and those schools could be super spreader events every day.
Yeah, and we looked at last season. We look at last season and the ways that COVID-19 outbreaks affected these teams and their seasons. Certainly, it caused the suspension of the season multiple times. Certainly, these cases had ended certain games and caused teams to forfeit. And I think about our matchup here in West Bloomfield coming up on Friday, Rochester Adams. It ended their season. They made the playoffs in that expanded playoff, and they had a COVID case pop up on their team and had to forfeit in the early rounds of the playoffs when they were really hitting their stride. And so for teams like that, like a Rochester Adams that's coming back this season after having their season really effectively ended by COVID-19, are you finding that teams, as they're preparing for this season, have extra motivation and are even more hungry to compete and to battle and to go and really play hard for a chance at a championship in a successful season than ever before?
Yeah, well, only a little bit hungrier and more motivated, because kids are always motivated come football season. The opener is always a huge deal. Last year was last year, and we want to do things a little different this year, but they're motivated all right. They already were motivated, even if last year would have been a normal year.
We're joined by Mick Mccabe. He is a high school sports writer and contributor for the Detroit Free Press, with us today on the Megacast. And Mick, you recently released your top 50 players as well as your top 25 teams. And just looking here in West Bloomfield, we have 3 players on that top 50 list: Dylan Tatum, defensive back and running back; linebacker Michael Williams; and offensive lineman Amir Herring. And the defending champion Lakers ranked at number 11. Now the Lakers still coming back with a lot of the talent that they had last year, a lot of veteran presence. Of course, those 3 players are just some of the many players that are returning from that championship team that did play a key role, but they're also a younger team. And is that part of the reason why, on top of the coaching change with Ron Bellamy exiting to become the defensive backs coach at the University of Michigan, that we're seeing the Lakers a little bit lower ranked to begin the season than we have in recent years?
Yeah, well, you can't lose your coach and be without having some problems early on. But more than that, Donovan Edwards was the best player in the state last year. Yeah, I mean, it's you don't lose the best player in the state and say, we're going to go win the state championship game again. Now, maybe they will, because the Lakers are very talented once again. But it's going to be a lot more difficult than it was last year. And it wasn't a breeze until they really got going in the state playoffs.
We're joined by Mick Mccabe on the Megacast. He is the high school sports writer and contributor to the Detroit Free Press. And yeah, I mean the losses on their team are significant. They're bringing a lot of people back. Tyrese Grice, their new head coach, played a key role in that championship team and in building this program at West Bloomfield as their defensive coordinator, and he has head coaching experience. So it's not to say that that he is not capable of running this team like Coach Bellamy was, or that this team doesn't still have a high level of talent. But there's a lot of change. You lose your star player in Donovan Edwards, graduating, and he moved on, goes to the University of Michigan. You lose your head coach who moves on after completing the circle, winning a championship, and moves on to the University of Michigan. You lose your veteran quarterback who had been a starter as a freshman before transferring to West Bloomfield, was a 2-year starter here, and now you have a little bit of a quarterback battle there between Rick Nance and Thomas Belazovic, which seems to be leaning more toward West Bloomfield. But there are a lot of teams that are coming into this year with a lot of promise. Who are some of those other teams, not just in southeastern Michigan, but really across the board, that you think are going to be the kings of the hill, those other teams that are developing, that are rebuilding, or that are also contending, are going to be looking at and saying, those are our targets?
Well, number one, overall, the entire state, we have DeWitt, Division III team, and they've got 8 starters back on offense, including their quarterback, Tyler Holtz, who's just really, really good. He's only about 5'10", so he's not a major college prospect, but he's going to go to the Ivy League at Brown and play at Brown. So he's getting an Ivy League education. They have a receiver, Tommy McIntosh, who's already committed to Wisconsin, and they have a tremendous coach, Rob Zimmerman, and they dismantled River Rouge last year in the D3 state championship game. And Rouge, they'll never gave up and came back to make a game of it for sure. But I think they're the best team in the state overall. And then outstate, go further out, Traverse City Central. And those 2 teams are playing at Michigan this week. Traverse City Central used to be, 25, 30 years ago, before they split into Traverse City Central, Traverse City West. They were a powerhouse every year. They won multiple state championships for Jim Uli. And Uli always said, because there was talk of having a second school, he goes, if they had a second school, I'm out of here. And as soon as they did, he was gone. And so they lost something when they have to share all their talent with another school, and they would be Division I if it was still just one school, and they would still be an absolute powerhouse. Well, this is their best team since the split. And last year, Central made a nice run to the semifinals, but I think they're capable of, if they put it together. They have Josh Burnham, who's going to Notre Dame as a linebacker, but he's also a quarterback, and he's just an athlete playing quarterback, a tough runner, and he can throw the ball. He's really going to be good. Grand Rapids Catholic Central, they're Division V, and they've won the last couple state championships, and they can compete in any division and be competitive. I'm not going to say they would win Division I state championship, but they could win a lot of playoffs games in Division I, in Division II, and Division III. I mean, they're really good. People don't realize how good they are. Muskegon is always going to be good. Rockford really got it together late in the season. So, yeah, we have a lot of talent out state, too.
And in terms of other teams that are not necessarily in that top 5, even in your top 25 necessarily, who are some of the teams that you believe will be surprises, not only in Division I, but really across the board in the state of Michigan? What are some of those teams that you think we'll be looking at mid-season and late season and saying this team's gaining momentum, they could make a run and maybe be one of those teams that upsets some of those kings of the hill at the top?
Yeah, well, Fordson is going to get better as the season goes on. And perhaps they can beat Belleville because Belleville's been the class of their league for several years now. Canton, they were a state power. I mean, they never won a state championship, but they got to state finals, and they were always now they've got some good players. This is the best team since Tim Beckler retired. And Kingsley in Division V, it's too bad Grand Rapids Catholic Central settled there. because Kingsley could win a state championship too. So we've got a lot of talent.
We're joined by Mick Mccabe. He is the high school sports writer and contributor for the Detroit Free Press with us on the Megacast today. And we can't go into a season like this without acknowledging what's also going on at the college football level, as we're going into a college football season now where for the first time players kind of have full control of their brand with name, image, and likeness regulations being more or less lifted in many cases, or severely less regulated at the college level. In terms of high school, of course, that's not going to be the same case at the high school level by any means, but it's going to have some effect on recruiting. How much of an impact do you believe that the new name, image, and likeness situation at the college level is going to have an impact in the minds of these high school students, especially those at the top levels that are going to be heavily recruited as they make their college plans and not only think about their future on the gridiron and in the classroom, but also about their growing brands as football players as well?
Well, all you need to know about is number one ranked quarterback in the country is from Texas. Mm-hmm. And he skipped his senior year to enroll at Ohio State, so he can start cashing in right now. And you always have to worry about the unintended consequences of any rule you put in. And with this, it's going to create a lot of jealousy in the locker room on kids who are making money off of this and kids who aren't. And then there's also the schools that kind of press the envelope a little bit. And what are they going to promise kids with the NIL when they're trying to recruit them? I mean, come here, and we know our boosters are going to buy whatever you sell. You're going to make a lot of money. And I don't know if the NCAA thought that through all the way.
We're joined by Mick Mccabe, high school sports writer and contributor with the Detroit Free Press, joining us today on the Megacast. And Mick, we have a few more minutes with you, so
sure.
Let's go and look forward and make some predictions. It's really early. It's way too early to determine who we think are necessarily the major contenders. Of course, we have our rankings and we have our opinions based on what we've seen in the past and what situations these teams are coming back into. But right now, who are the teams that you're looking at, particularly in Division One, as that affects the teams that we cover mostly in West Bloomfield and Orchard Lake and so on? What are these? Who are the teams that you believe right now are the most likely to be champions? Or who is your prediction in Division One this year, particularly for state champion?
I think it's going to be in tomorrow's paper, and I have to recall what I did, but okay. I picked Novi Detroit Catholic Central to win the Division I state championship. And that'll be tough because they're going to, somewhere along the line, they're going to have to match up with Belleville and then, West Bloomfield down the road. So it won't be easy, but I think Catholic Central has a lot of kids back. Declan Lyle is a very talented quarterback. He got a good defense, and I think CC is going to win a state title this year.
Yeah, Catholic Central has been one of those teams that has been a contender and has been extremely competitive in Division One over the last several years. West Bloomfield matched up with them in the playoffs very recently, just a few years back, and that was a highly competitive game. It's one of those teams that, whether they are one of the top dogs out there or they're more middle of the road, they're always going to give the best of the best a lot of trouble on the football field, especially at playoff time. They're a really well prepared team every single year, and of course they come in this year loaded again with talent. So that's a team that's going to be in contention. And Division One is an extremely competitive division in the MHSAA on the football field this season. So it's going to be a really interesting season on top of just the fact that we're having a regular season. We're going to have fans back in the stands, and we're going to have a season that's beginning on time, and hopefully all goes well and it continues to operate on a timely schedule and doesn't meet any of those sorts of blockades that we had or stoppages that we had last season, because it looks like it's going to be a highly competitive and exciting season of football. Mick, before we let you go, anything else that you'd like to say, or anything other interesting stories that we should know as we head into the high school football season?
No, there's a lot of good stories out there. Harper Woods is going to join the OAA. I mean, that'll be the first non-Oakland County school and they open up. They're still an independent for football this year, but every other sport, beginning in the winter season, is going to be in the OAA. So that's something that's, and then Harper Woods will be in football next fall. So that's something that's hanging out there. And then also we're using this year for football the expanded playoff point average, enhanced playoff point average system, where you can get more wins for losing than you have in the past, which is supposed to encourage teams to play bigger schools and take a chance. At least they're not going home empty-handed if they lose, because it's so hard to schedule now, and this may help them schedule future opponents, but it hasn't helped this year because we got too many teams playing out-of-state teams or the Catholic League playing teams from Ontario, and that's never good.
Well, Mick, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Anytime, guys.